much for technical difficulties. Well, my name is Callie Mettler-Smith, and I'm here with Seth Brady, who is the
Hello.
author of the Wellspring Saga books.
Mhm.
And so how many books are in this series, Seth?
So Wellspring Saga has 3 books in total, 2 of which have already come out, one of which has re-released. Those are Godspeed and Witch Hunt, and we've got a third one that we'll be releasing, and we'll have cover art and all that for it, hopefully soon.
Yes.
Um,
I can share the cover if you're
oh, yeah.
so inclined. If you can see, there's the cover of the first book, Godspeed, and it's now available right now on Amazon Kindle and iBooks for $2.99, which is pretty cool. And so I'll take that away. If you're listening to this, you can see the cover in the store in the show notes. But so tell us a little bit about this. When I describe this book to people, I describe it as Harry Potter on steroids.
That's quite the compliment. And see, what's funny is I've had quite a few people be like, "Oh, it's Harry Potter mixed with this, or Harry Potter but this." And the funny part is, I've had to say this: I've never actually read Harry Potter.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I think the comparison comes in for me, Seth, because the first book is really centered around a school for gifted children.
Yeah, and I will admit, I sort of took inspiration. Now I've only seen the movies, but I took inspiration. Now I'm like, what would be my take on that? And why would I have a world of magic where people would want to learn magic?
Sure.
And the biggest thing for me is I've always loved mythology. So the biggest center for the Wellspring Saga is I want mythology, legends, epic stories to be at the center of everything.
Sure. Well, and I think you do a good job of capturing that. In book 1, we have the gods.
Mm-hmm.
We have witches.
Yep.
We have witch hunters.
Yep.
We have mystical beings, I guess, and we have elves.
Yep.
Am I missing anybody?
The one other thing I'd want to add is we have Atlantis.
Okay, yes, we have Atlantis. In fact, the book starts in Atlantis.
Yeah. And it was very interesting kind of keeping Atlantis at the heart of this, even in some of the later stories, because the main character, Kasuga, is from Atlantis. So everything is from this very alien viewpoint of someone from this mystical city.
Sure. Well, and I think that not so much in the first book, but later on in the series, you also get to meet Arthur and Lancelot.
Yep.
And we meet Galahad in the first book, right?
Yes. No,
Remind
he
I've
was
read
he
all
was
three of
more
them.
of a he was more of a callback to the Galahad from Arthurian legend. He's not supposed to be the same person.
Right.
But I thought, I want a knight in the modern day, and what's a good knightly name? And just
Galahad.
Galahad.
Why not? Why not? If you're going to give it a knight name, why not call him
Exactly.
Galahad? And he is very honorable.
He is. He's actually one of my favorite minor characters that I have ever written. Because even though he never takes up a major story beat, the character arc he goes through, not just in the first book, but in the second and third books as well, is this story of honor and redemption and courage that I just absolutely loved telling.
Yes. Well, and so I've been talking a lot about writing styles lately. through some projects that I have going on. But one of the things that I have used these books as a good example is of how not to do an information dump, but introduce your characters in an organic way. And so I like to point out that even though you have so many characters, would you say it's fair to say you probably have over 30 supporting characters in the first book?
Oh dear goodness, probably. Round if it's under 30, it's only barely under
Yeah,
30. I have a lot of characters.
yeah, because in the first book you have all of the gods, you have all of the teachers and the people that exist at the school. Then you have this mystical council that kind of oversees everything. So I think it probably is fair to say you have, if not 30, either right below or right above. And each one of those characters, I think that something that stood out for me when I read the book for the first time was that each one of these characters are very complex and very much have their own voice. And you really get a sense for who each of those characters is throughout the series. Some of them you introduce them in book one, and they really develop more over time. Jacob was one of those characters for me that I felt like I kind of knew who he was in the first book, but then towards the end of the book, I was invested heavily in him. Anybody, I'm really proud to say that through the process of editing these books, that Seth and I almost had to go to publisher author counseling because I was so heavily invested in one of the characters, and he kills that character at the very end of book 3. And I just almost picked up the phone, I think it was like 3:00 in the morning, and said, we're going to have to break up if you're going to keep doing stuff like this.
Yeah, I remember you actually, not even just a private message. There was a Facebook post the next day, just like, Seth. I'm like, oh no, what did I do? Do I need to go to another country and hide?
I think so. Well, and I knew going into it, you knew that some of the characters I was really passionate about. And I think going into book 3, I think there was a warning label that said something like, you may or may not want to talk to me after you read this. And I was pretty close to having this real tear-jerking moment where I wasn't sure if we could be friends after this.
Yeah, that was... Oh dear goodness, that I remember when that happened, when you first read it, and I understood, especially because it was as of book 2 that you told me, man, I really love this character. And I'd already finished all the plotting and everything for book 3 by that point, and I'm just like, oh no. I'm not changing it as of this point, but oh no.
Well, I think when we were talking about character development, there were 2 characters that I really feel stand out to me as a really great example of character development over a long period of time. And Jacob is one of the ones that I really use for that, because while he is present in all 3 books, I feel like we get like almost pieces fed to us over a long period of time of really knowing what this character is about. And I feel like, in book 1, I think it's pretty safe to say by the end of the book 1, we realize that Jacob's intentions may not align to everybody else's.
Yeah.
But we're still pretty on board with him being a good guy. And we really believe in him as a character, and we're really, he's kind of sometimes the voice of reason, and I feel like if you ever do a character study of a great character, Jacob, I mean, there's so many great characters in these books, but Jacob is one that I just really became so invested in. Well, is he good? Is he not good? Well, is he good in his own way? What, and then we have the question of, what is he really? Is he human? Is he not human? And we don't, by the end of book one, we really have started to question that, but I really think that we really, in book two, we're really like on board with this. Well, who is this guy? Do you think that that's a fair thing to say, is that his character development is something that develops over the series and not necessarily all in one book, right?
I definitely say that, and something I loved with Jacob from the very beginning. He's one of the few characters I had this planned out. So many other characters changed as far as like what they were going to do, how they were going to develop, but Jacob pretty much stayed constant in my mind. Um, and I always wanted him to be this morally gray character. You see a lot of virtues in him, but you also see a lot of stuff that makes you question his morals, or at least where they lie.
Right. I think his allegiance.
Yeah.
You really question where his allegiance lines several places in throughout the series. I think you start that questioning towards the very end of book one. I think it's the first inkling that you're just like, what's going on with him?
Yeah, I remember there was a that moment, and when Matt, my proofreader, he was the first person to read this section. He got to a scene with Jacob and Suresh, who is one of the gods, and he flipped out because he's just like, Suresh is afraid of this dude.
Right.
Why is Suresh, a god, afraid of this dude? And that's the moment that you just start realizing there is a lot to Jacob that he is not letting on.
Right. And I don't think that you truly, I mean, I think that is the point where you really realize that there's something not quite right here, but I really don't think you get the answer. Well, I know you don't get the answer probably even till book three of what really is not right. Um, for me, another really great character, and I know that you have told me this is one of your favorite characters, is Madeline. And and
Love
so
Madeline.
yes, if you haven't read the book, Madeline, she's not in book one at all, is she? She comes in book two,
She
correct?
gets referenced in book one, but you don't actually see her until book two.
Yeah. And you meet her towards the beginning of book two. And I said, one of the funniest things about Madeline is that you never see the world through her eyes. She is never a point of view character, but, and we never get in kind of a glimpse of what's going on. Almost all of her character development is through her dialogue.
Yes, and I loved that concept of this kind of person who just does not shut up. She does not keep her thoughts inside.
She does not shut up. God, that's great.
But just she has no filter. Any thoughts that pop into her mind, they're coming out. And just something that I loved about her is, even though she was very simple to design, there's complexity in her character because she has a lot of, traditionally feminine qualities, like, oh, I love clothes and I love to party. The stuff you see in social media that's just like hashtag just girl things. And then 5 seconds later, it's just like, I want to punch that guy in the face.
Yeah.
I love how Maudlin can,
well, and I there's a really great scene in book two where she's fighting in a bar. I cannot remember who she's fighting with. It's
a few people.
Yeah, I think several people at once. But what stood out to me about that scene is that she is flirting with the person that she's fighting with, basically telling them how hot she thinks they are. And in between like the fight scene, she's going, well, aren't you a cutie? You want, after this is over, you want to go have some fun, stuff. And then I think she loses the battle or gets pinned somewhere. And then I remember she has this really great thing of like, well, isn't that a bummer? Like, I'm done. And I mean, even up until the point where her character kind of exits the story, she still is just giving us these really great one-liner things. And I also love the fact that she just seems to have no morals at all.
Yeah, I think the best way is I've heard some characters described as they're not immoral, they're amoral. They don't care about moral
Right.
standards.
She doesn't. No, she doesn't care who she hurts or what's going on. So so my favorite character is Amber. I think we have talked about this. Who is your favorite character from the books?
So my favorite character of all of them is Lucy.
I
Um,
was gonna say,
yeah, and
but
what's funny is she started off as this throwaway character. Like she was barely going to get any dialogue. She wasn't going to show up until book 3,
oh
and then
wow,
over time, I'm just like, I have stuff I want to do with this, and she evolved into not just a good character, but honestly, I think one of the best and most complex characters that I have ever written. Um, because, and I'm going to keep this as spoiler free as possible, but from like moment one, you see all this hatred she has, especially towards Amber.
yeah.
And the relationship that those two have together is phenomenal because I love how they interact with one another.
Yeah, and I would say I think that that is one of the reasons that I came to love Amber so much was because of her relationship with Lucy and the complexity that again we get an inkling of that in book 1. Their story really breaks free in book 2, and it's one of the big focuses of book 2. Um but I do think that one of the reasons I loved Amber so much was because of Lucy.
Okay.
You know, I just loved, absolutely adored, and I really liked Lucy as a character. She just wasn't my favorite because I don't think I identified with her on the level that I did Amber. um Another thing that people that have read the books have mentioned to me is they love the fact that all of the books were kind of self-contained and that you didn't have to read all 3 of them. That you could read book 2 and still get everything that was going on, vice versa. With book 1, that it has a very defined problem that is wrapped up by the end of book 1. That happens
Yeah.
with book 2 and book 3, where they have an overall. I think book 3 is probably more true about the fact that everything that has been transpiring prior to book 3 kind of comes to a head
Yeah.
at the end. But really both book 1 and book 2 have their own storyline that kind of comes, ties in a neat little bow, and we have characters that enter and exit through the course of the series. um, some of them show up multiple times throughout the story, without being an integral part of the storyline. And so how many characters, I'm going to put you on the spot, how many characters do you think you have throughout the whole series?
Throughout the whole series, oh dear goodness. Hmm. Going from book 1 to book 3, I probably have a solid 40 characters total, with almost like a tangled web of like relationships between
Sure.
them. And it's, oh dear goodness, yeah, probably about 40. I toned it back on adding new characters in books 2 and 3, but I
That
still
must have been
have.
difficult.
Oh, you have no idea. Um, and it's that was part of what was difficult was that self-contained storyline was trying to keep each book as this is its own story, but it's also part of a bigger story kind of thing.
Sure.
And that was something I always kept in mind, was whose story is this book, and I tried to keep the focal characters contained within that. So like, Godspeed is Jason's story.
Sure.
Then book 2 was Amber and Lucy's story. And then book 3, even though he was the titular character starting off, book 3 was Kasuga's story.
Wait. Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with that. I would also throw in that maybe even book 2 and book 3 were Jennifer and Jacob's story also.
Yeah, and I that was something that was very interesting to write, was the relationship between Jennifer and Jacob.
Yeah.
They're almost opposites in a lot of ways. Jennifer is this person who holds on to emotions for an incredibly long amount of time, whereas Jacob is this guy who's trying to like get rid of all of these emotions that he has because he feels it constantly gets in the way. And so the fact that they have the relationship with one another that they do is just like, how do you two work? You have to actually like try to make it work.
Right.
And I love that about them.
Yeah.
And I will admit, to this day, Jennifer is still like my favorite villain that I have ever written.
Really? Yeah, that makes me think.
Like I've written a lot of good villains, but Jennifer is just this epic, fabulous bad guy who she walks on the scene and you stay out of her way because it's not wise otherwise.
Yeah.
Um,
So taking us back to book 1, when you talk about that it's Jason's story, why? So do you feel like Jason is kind of the driver of the story in book 1? Tell us what the premise of the story is.
so the premise of the story of book 1, Godspeed, is this young boy Jason has just turned 11, and he discovers that he has magic. And through that discovery, his parents send him and his best friend Lorelei, who just, I adore Lorelei, she's so precious. But they go to a school named Circe Academy, and it's all about learning what the magic of this world is, about the mythology of the 9 gods of the pantheon, learning about all these epic, mythical heroes who had magic. And part of the reason why I say it's Jason's story is he is our conduit for learning about this world. Starting off, we have the same knowledge of magic that he does, which is absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also kind of this coming of age story for him, because when Godspeed starts, Jason is this basically coward. He has very little self-confidence. He constantly stands behind Lorelei, expecting her to stick up for him. And throughout time, you get to see him grow as a person and as a magician, as he gets hold of this unique magic that he has called oromancy, which was one of my favorite mechanics to write. And he starts to learn that he is a lot stronger and a lot braver than he ever thought he could be.
Mm-hmm.
And he just had to find those reasons to stand up for himself and for what he believed in. And the fact that, the enemies he has to face are gods. I don't care if everything is stacked against me. I have stuff that I have to fight for, that I have to stand up for. And I'm going to. So all of that came together, and just thinking about it, even though there are plenty of other important character and story beats within Godspeed, it is so much focused on Jason learning how to be a magician and really coming into his own. And while he still has plenty of story in books 2 and 3, book 1 was just that massive leap for him.
Sure. Well, and I guess we see the story from him. He is kind of the character that we exist in for most of the book.
Yeah.
You know, we're probably the most closely tied to him throughout the book. Through the first book. I mean, I think we do spend some time with him later on, but a lot of what the world that we're in and we're experiencing are through his eyes and kind of his emotions and stuff. Now, how old is he at the end of the series?
So at the end of the entire series, he is 15, almost 16 years old.
Okay. And he matures. I mean, it's a very different Jason at the beginning of the books is versus the end. Do you so of that, so in the first book we spend a lot of time at the story, at the not the story but the school, and the focus there is with the students and they're learning about magic, and then the teachers, that's when we meet a lot of the teachers of the magic school, and then the council that oversees kind of magic all over the world. We spend probably the majority of the book with those characters, and then the gods are kind of introduced throughout the book, and they're really kind of the villains, I guess, of the book.
Yeah, some of them more unwitting villains than others. You know, Eon is a man who's basically shoved into this by his circumstances. Loki would have gone for it anyway.
Yeah. So there's even within the gods, there's different complexities of villainism and personalities
Yeah,
within them.
and in some ways, I wish I'd had a little less characters because it would have given me more time to develop the rest of the gods. Some of the gods do get more focus and development than others. Zeus is pretty one note, but I mean, have you read Greek mythology? He's pretty one note there too, so I
Yeah.
don't feel as bad about that.
Yeah.
But still, I like the gods that I did develop. Ones like Marisi and Eon and Loki and Artemis. Just you get to see how vastly different they are from one another.
Sure. Well, and that they're in their own way almost human, with
Yeah,
very real problems and very real wants and needs. And I think that is a theme that kind of goes through all three books, through all of the characters, that they're all, even though they're not all human, that they all kind of have, it's, none of them are really black or white. You know, all of them kind of have, um, you know, their own agenda of things that they want to happen. They all kind of, sometimes they clash with each other because of that. But I think that it's probably fair to say that all of them make their own choices as far as, you know, how much into that gray area they're willing to step throughout the course of the series.
yeah, I definitely agree, and you know, even some of the ones who at face value look, you know, really black and white as far as their ideology goes. It, Loki is my best example of that. He's very jaded. He almost feels like I have no other options left.
But to be bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, it was surprising to me early on. I never thought I'd get the chance to develop him as much as I did, but he turned into a far deeper and more fun character than I'd ever expected.
So, and Loki is the god of deception.
Yes.
And so Loki, each one of the gods that is present in Godspeed is a god of something.
Yes.
And how many? I'm drawing a blank on how many are there total. 8 or 9?
9.
Okay, 9 gods. And so they were all captured by the Greeks.
Various magicians. I never actually gave them a whole name
Okay.
specifically.
And so the premise of the first book is that somebody is hunting down these gods to release them because they want to harness their power. And all of these magicians at the magic school are the teachers. 3 of them have wound up dead at the beginning of the book, and that story, the storyline of the gods being hunted and the storyline of the teachers being dead all kind of merge into what in Jason's story of self-discovery all kind of merge into the central storyline of the first book.
Yeah.
And so would you which one of the books was your favorite one to write, Seth?
Whew, favorite one to write. Um, that is a tough one. Honestly, I'd say book 2, Witch Hunt, was probably my favorite to write.
Really? Because usually the second one is not people's favorites.
Yeah. By the time I got to book 2, I was a little bit more confident and comfortable as a writer. And I just, there were so many scenes I wrote for that story that it just felt really, really good. The bar scene with Maudlin you mentioned earlier is one of my favorite fight scenes that I've ever written.
Yes. That scene is probably one of my favorite scenes of the whole series. And then in book 3, I think it's book 3, one of the final fight scenes to me is like if you've seen the Avengers movie, the one that just came out about the Infinity Gauntlet,
Yeah.
where all the Avengers are on the field and they're all kind of in this epic battle, showcasing their different powers and stuff. For me, you have a scene similar to that where everybody kind of comes together and like they battle it out, and you kind of see that even people that are fighting each other like each other and have respect for each other, and really don't want to hurt each other. They just are so conflicted by what they feel is right or wrong. That's why I feel like there's so many characters that really have this gray area that they're operating in, because we genuinely like it. Another one of my favorite characters was, and I'm drawing a total blank, the white friend of Jacob's.
The white friend. The woman?
Yes.
Agatha.
Okay, Agatha. Sorry, she is present in book 2, but I don't think she really has any lines.
Not much. She's
Not
just
much.
a background character, but you get to see a little bit of her relationship with Jacob, but it's more to reflect on him than on her.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, to me, Agatha was one of those surprise characters that came in book 3 that I really loved. And I wanted to know so much about her. I just really, like, the more I knew about her, the more I wanted to know about her. And you did a really good job of delivering a really good scene where we really see her backstory.
Oh yeah, just when I first wrote that, I was so worried because I'm like, I am kind of going dark and serious on this.
Yeah. Where
But
most of all 3 of books is what I would consider fantasy with humor, and very lighthearted, and even the fight scenes would be appropriate for a 13 or 14-year-old to read. There's no gory elements through any of the books, even though there is great battles and people do die. Even though we don't want to talk about the ones that do pass away, but
I know. Be strong, Callie. Be strong.
tears were shed at the end of the third book. That's all I'm gonna say. Tears were shed. It was serious.
Yeah. Is it too late to still apologize?
I don't know. It's gonna take years for us to mend our relationship.
You are
So,
not going to like the stuff I send you over the next couple of weeks.
so what are you working on now, Seth? What is your plan after moving forward and closing out this epic saga, which will be releasing? Book 1 is available right now. And then books 2 and 3 will come out over the next 2 months. And then at one point you'll be able to just buy them as a box set altogether. But what is your plans moving forward? Are you going to continue on with some of the characters? Are you let us know what's going on.
Sure. So, I will be continuing in the same world of Wellspring Saga. But it's not going to be as epic of a storyline anymore. It's going to be a little bit tighter, a little bit more close-knit and heartfelt. We'll have some characters returning. Lucy is one of the 2 protagonists of the first book in this new series. But we're also going to have some brand new characters. Well, one of my favorite characters that I have ever written, Samantha Serenity O'Brien, is the other protagonist of this first book. And I think people are absolutely going to love her. It is aimed at a slightly older audience, still teenagers, but like 16 and up, as opposed to the like 12, 13 and up of Wellspring Saga. But it's a series of 3 stories and 1 side story that talks all about love in its various forms. So the first one has themes of familial love. The second is that of romantic and relational love. Yira, which is honestly, in my opinion, my magnum opus, and side story in this, is about love of self, not in a narcissistic way, but just that learning to accept yourself as you are kind of way. And then the last one, which I have not yet gotten to, but I do have planning for it, is going to be about love of friends. And as cliche as that sounds, I've got a lot to say about that. I think people are going to enjoy these storylines. And it's funny that you brought up Agatha of all characters, because she is the overarching character for all of these. And while she's taking a back seat in the first 2, as well as the side story Yira, she is very much present there and very much a reason why a lot of the stuff is going on.
Woohoo!
And the last one comes out, and she's the focus. She is the protagonist.
That's awesome.
And I'm very, very happy to be bringing her story to light in full.
Yeah. Well, and I loved her. I mean, she was a lot like Jacob, where you were never really sure if she was good or bad. And she was such a complex character, and she was a real surprise for me, because she was really in the background. Like, we know she exists, but we really don't see the heart of her until book 3. And when we do, I was so invested in her. So I'm glad you continued on with her, because I really do love her a lot.
Yes, and a minor sort of spoiler for her character, I suppose, is she is very heavily connected with music, which is where I got the inspiration for the series title for this next series from, which is Ballad of the Jingos. And
Mm,
there's a heavy music theme throughout all of these books that eventually you will see why it is going to pay off. But because it is Agatha's story all in all, I'm like, music is the focus here.
sure. So,
So, and while it's not going to have the mythology tie-ins, I do want to say that the main villain of this story is related to mythology, so I still have my roots there.
there you go. So, Seth, if we wanted to find you on social media, where would we look?
So the best places to look for me, if you want to like actual links,
Yeah.
um, first and foremost, um, we have my Facebook page, which I will be updating over the next couple months as the re-releases and such happen. Facebook.com/Kasiga official. That's KASIGAH official.
Okay.
And then I'm also on Twitter. And the handle for that is at Kasiga Origin. That's KASIGAHORIGIN.
Right.
And those are the two main places to find me. If I add any new social media in the future, I will be adding links to that to my major pages.
Sure. And if you are not sure, you can always go to Seth's page on the Clear Fort Publishing website. You can just click on the main page and type on search and put in Seth Brady, and it will bring you up to, and there's links to his social media through there. If you are interested in buying the first book, it is available, and it's a $2.99 investment, well worth the price of admission. And I will warn you to set aside a good few hour block when you start reading it, because I promise that once you get into this world, you will be so compelled to find out what happens to the characters that you won't be able to put the book down. So that seems to be the overall theme, is that people that start reading it really love the series so much that they just are intrigued and want to spend more time with the characters and want to know what happens to them. And that's the great thing about wonderful characters, that we're so invested that we want to know what happens to them, right?
Yeah. And I've heard that from a few people, and it always makes me blush. I'm like, "Aw, that's
Aww.
really nice." Like, that's the best thing as a writer I could hear someone say is, "I had a hard time putting it down." Though I have had a couple people I've had to say, "Look, I cannot endorse skipping class and/or work for this. My book will still be there when you get home."
Sure. We are not encouraging that. I have said on many, many occasions, you are my very favorite nerd in the whole wide world. And
Oh,
I'm really glad that I got to spend some time talking about this wonderful series with you today.
yeah, I was really glad to get to talk with you about it too.
Awesome. Well, we will sign off for right now. I'm going to close the live stream.